Well, welcome. So I met Carol Cabre at a Presbyterian Women event where I was teaching earlier this year, and she had heard me speak, and she's like, I need you to come to our church and talk more about that stuff here. And I was like, I'm happy to do that. But it is very common that I do tour our presbytery. I teach at many different functions throughout our presbytery and throughout our community because I'm very invested in this information that I'm going to share a little bit with you about today. But before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about me personally, and then I want to know a little bit about you, and then we'll get started. But I am a mom of two. I've been a wife of 15 years, and I grew up in Florida for the most part. My family moved here when I was 10, and I've lived in Central Florida, and I just love what I do. I love being a mom, I love being a counselor, and I love being a part of ministry, and I've done that for a very long time. I've been on a mission trip to the DR in Haiti, and so I've been throughout Central and South America. I used to speak Spanish a lot better when I was in my 20s, so I kind of lost it, which surprisingly, even though my husband speaks Spanish all the time, and I have to remind him, like, habla inglés, like he's speaking to me in Spanish all the time, and he's too fast. But so that's a little bit about me, and I do live in Ormond, but my offices are throughout Volusia County, so where we have 20 counselors and 10 offices in Volusia, Flagler, and then we just started one in Seminole County at Tuscaloosa Pres, and we're a sponsored ministry through our Central Florida Presbytery. I mean, it is all about relationship. Throughout Scripture, we learn about stories that are relevant to us because of relationships, and the parables are all about metaphors and relationships, and that's basically what I do. Is I am a relationship theorist, an attachment theorist. So as we talk today, I'll be back next week, and I'm going to do part one today, which is discussing the social emotional needs of all of us, but it starts with babies, even in utero. And then it's going to go into protective factors, which is the science of this work in terms of how do we stay safe, because we know the feelings and experiences of feeling safe and feeling secure help strengthen our relationships. So you are in these committed relationships because you feel safe and secure in them. It's typically when relationships fall apart when they're not feeling safe or they're not secure. So seeking security, finding security, seeking safety is throughout our lifespan. But it does start in early ages, and that's part of the work that I do. And then next week when I'm coming back, I'll talk about the other remaining pieces there. So I hope you come back next week. If not, it's being recorded, and you'll be able to take advantage of the recordings. So I did want to give some statistics because, of course, as you know, mental health, I think, has become much more of a hot topic of discussion. We see a lot more conversations about it. We see a lot more literature. But we know even before COVID, approximately 1.5, and these are from Mental Health America, so these are stats within the US, 1.5 million adults have some type of mental illness. We know that suicide ideation and suicides are on the rise. Unfortunately, we see 24% of people are not getting the services that they need for mental health. And our youth, looking at this middle ground here, the orange section, 9.7 of our youth experience some form of depression, and 12.4 are identified highest among youth who identify as more than one race. So we see that maybe our minorities or disenfranchised populations have a higher tendency of suffering from depression. The green stat here, of youth with depression, 60% do not receive mental health, and that means 1 out of 3. So if we think about us in this room, we would think almost a third of us would not be receiving help, even though we need it. And even among youth with severe depression who receive treatment, only 27% get consistent care. Now this part is why I think you being here is so important. Having a caregiver, having an adult, having a church family, someone who can support and encourage someone when they're in need is very important, because I think part of the reason why people aren't getting help, or especially young people, is they don't know how to get it and they don't have someone to go to. And then the last stat here, the 10.8, is there's unfortunately many Americans who are not insured, and this is increasing because of just various changes within our insurance and medical healthcare system. So the stats are what they are. I like to show the data because that's why you're here and I'm here. This is going back into children's mental health, which is really surprising when I told you that I'm an infant mental health specialist. Believe it or not, 3 to 5 years of age, we already see signs of depression and anxiety and behavior problems. If you already knew this, we see more suspensions and expulsions within preschools than high schools. And it's because of the behavior problems. And you'll notice anxiety continues to rise with age. Now, are you curious as to why? Why is it the older we get, the more anxious we become? Any thoughts?
Because we live in this world.
We live in this world. Stressful times. So it goes back to the subject. We are infiltrated with media. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. And especially our young people seek it. And I know for us, the older generation, we are constantly being asked to be more efficient in our generation. So that's part of the reason that I'm here is we can almost guarantee that half of the people in your congregation, and especially your young people, have some level of anxiety. We all have feelings where we've been anxious. We all have felt and dealt with pressure, but to the point that we then need treatment for it or need to seek counseling for it, we can see that it's definitely on the rise. And so it affects all of us, myself included. So what we know, I'm hoping I'm still in range, what we know is that the availability of at least one stable, reliable caregiver can make the difference in anyone's world. When you have an anchor, when you have a home base, when you have a place of safety and security, that you come home to someone who's warm, who's receiving you, who's welcoming you, who's loving and respecting you, your life is better. But when you come home and there's a hand, or there's no one there, or there's anger or violence, or there's what we say disruptions in that relationships, then we know that health decreases. So this is where it affects us all. But if we understand these dynamics of attachment, and we know that if we have these strong caregivers in our world, we actually have improved executive function, we think better, and we're more regulated. So again, it's all about improving our relationships, and there's a lot of science to this. Here within a faith community, we know that if there's certain principles that the ministries that are offering, that you hear from the pulpit, that you communicate to someone beside you in the pew, if you speak in a general language or in a general theme, that welcoming language, that healing language, that respect that comes from appreciating relationships, people will start to return. I don't know if they've ever gathered the statistics as to how many visitors come back, but have you done this within your church? And what's the factor that usually gets someone to come back, a visitor?
Personal touch.
Personal touch. It's not necessarily the message from the pulpit, right? And I'm not here to try to try to say anything about your pastor, because he's wonderful, right? And I'm sure he's doing a beautiful, amazing job. But you have to personalize your connection. If someone greeted you, if someone noticed you, if someone saw you and brought it out into the awareness, into the universe, they're like, someone saw me today. Yes?
Yeah, why do you think that the situation in our country now is they're trying to break up families, destroy those relationships, rather than promote them? You don't hear much about solving the problem with families. It's some other thing, external things that are causing the problem.
Well, I think it goes back actually to anxiety. I think stress and how we manage stress hasn't necessarily been taught to us at a young age. So these concepts are becoming more integrated into our educational system. But I can tell you, even with my master's program, it wasn't talked about like this. Relationship concepts were additional learning that I got after my master's degree. And so all of the interns that I supervise, and even in my current teaching, and with the my fellow faculty and staff that I work with, these are concepts that are still coming of age. Mental health and psychology is the baby of all medicine. It's the newest of all fields, or what we say kind of areas of medicine. So understanding human connection is still very young. I would say it's kind of in the infant stages. And so we're kind of just catching up with saying, like, we don't handle stress very well. We just don't. Instead, we take guns to schools, or we take guns to try to solve a problem. Yes?
I can tell you that our fathers and forefathers, and a lot of the military, back in the day, emotion, they couldn't share their emotion. Right? They were like, my father himself hardly ever talked about the hard times to us.
Right. So even understanding that part to ourselves, is kind of coming into this generation. Now we may say it's a little overkill. I mean, I call it a lot of verbal vomiting. The media is full of like too much information sometimes. But their transparency is also part of their healing and identifying with their story, because we all have a story. But when we deny part of our story, when we deny circumstances that may affect us, when we may not look at something because we're intimidated by it, or it may be scary, or we don't know how to manage it, then we just try to act like it's not happening, when it's always there. It's always there, and it affects us throughout our continuum of lifespan, right? So now we're of a generation and a science that is recognizing the importance of addressing our mental health. And I call it mental wellness. Like, even myself, I've been in counseling. I need to be a counselor to be a counselor. I have to be, because we spill over on each other all the time. So when I have a stressful day, because I have legal cases, and sometimes they can get very tumultuous, they're high conflict cases, they definitely affect me. To think that they don't, I would be ignorant to that. But great comment. I don't know if that really answered your question.
No, I just, the biggest connection between poverty and crime is single families.
Yes.
Single parent homes. Yet we don't talk about that. We try to fix it.
Well, I can tell you the Center for Disease Control, which was one of the statistics that I pulled up, the children's mental health stats. So one of their highest areas of research is actually the impact of stress. We call it the modern day disease. And there is some studies that have done through some pharmaceutical companies, and Kaiser Permanente had started some studies. And what we know, and Dr. Folletti has been kind of leading this work, he's out of California, but we know that there are certain adverse childhood experiences that affect our trajectory throughout our lifespan. So there's 10 different questions, and I may have time to pull it up. It's called the ACE study, ACE, and there's a ton of research on the ACE study. But if we all answer these 10 questions, and I think I can probably name them off the top of my head, if you had witnessed violence in your home, if you had someone imprisoned, if you had someone who had a physical health issue, someone with imprisonment, if you were neglected, if you were not had your needs met, so there's like those kind of questions. And if the higher your score, then we know it affects your physical health. And that's what the long-term study had shown. So I think if you had an ACE score of 4 or higher, it already changes. Like, there's a huge connection between a 4 on the ACE study and potential substance abuse. And so we know that there's a huge connection between how you grew up and what you were exposed to and stressors, and how it actually translates into your health. There's no equator here. It's not like there's a line that separates what's going on in my head and my heart to how my body responds. Yes?
Yes, I would like to understand something. Those issues I understand can happen 2 ways. One is some chemical process imbalance in the brain, and the other is what we have been talking, that's called the social pressure.
Environmental and genetics, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
When that happens, maybe because you are in that area, the people with the problem get checked to know, see if it's one thing or the other, and is the treatment for those 2 different cases different? Is individualized, is what I mean, because what I notice is the medicine right now is very standard. Like, if I have cholesterol problem and another person who is 100 pounds heavier than me have cholesterol problem,
You're both given the same medicine,
way, and
right?
that should not happen.
Right,
It's
right.
something that I have noticed every time I go to the doctor. It's very disappointing because I'm not being treating my body individually as it is, but I am part of the statistic. And they give me the same prescription, they give it to another person that it should not work the same for both times.
I mean, obviously I'm not a physician, but I can tell you, working with several medical, what I'll say, kind of disciplines, is that we are getting better at treating us holistically and looking at identifying what may be the potential source of the struggle. So Eastern medicine, Western medicine, if you're familiar a little bit, some will say Western medicine is more along the lines of what you're saying. Like, we look at the root causes and go there and not treat the symptoms. Some will say in Eastern medicine, we kind of treat the symptoms first to stabilize you and then dig into the root of things. So it's just a matter of what angle you want to take, and depending on severity, like, no matter what, I'm not going to be effective in meeting with someone if they're not feeling stable. They have to be at a point to receive the information and apply it. And there's ways that you can gauge that, as physicians do too. Like if you have non-compliance or if you have someone who's a little resistant, there's ways to manage and to work with that. But it's just a matter of where that person is. But we do believe that it's kind of a combination of two things. It's both our genetics, like we all have what we say kind of cancer cells. It's just a matter of then we're exposed to the carcinogen that activates the growth. Or do we all have on some level somewhere in our history someone who did struggle with depression or anxiety, but then there was a life event that triggered that weakness within us and then exposed us to various factors where those symptoms became more pronounced. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So it's really, not that it's not important to know where they come from, but at the end of the day, it's still, we're gonna work on treatment. We wanna see health improve. And we're gonna try various ways to do it. And when you go to a doctor, most of them are gonna write you a script because that's what they do. They wanna know you're feeling better, and a lot of people want a prescription. They just do. They want a prescription. So, okay, great discussion, sure. So here's where I love to say where I think my ministry is balancing the science and integrating it into my faith. So ever since I was a little girl, I was sharing with Victoria, I'm Greek. Probably wouldn't know that. My maiden name is Kassatakis. But I was raised in the Orthodox Church. And I remember at a very young age, my parents bringing me to church. And I was born in Chicago and I lived there for 10 years. And our church was near an overpass. And there was a gentleman and he would be calling out to people walking into church from the parking lot. And he would be talking to us and reading scripture in Greek. Now, interesting, if you're familiar with the Orthodox faith a little bit, we were not introduced to the Bible until I was in high school. I never even touched a Bible. It only came through the priest. And so I didn't know a whole lot about Jesus other than I showed up on Sunday and I tried to be a good girl and I tried to do the right things and I had a nice community, but I really didn't know personally what God was in my life until I was introduced to Young Life, if you're familiar with Young Life. And Young Life then kind of gave me what I say, the answer to a savior. And what did Jesus have to do with me? And so from there, my faith journey evolved and I knew I was supposed to be a counselor from a very young age. A lot of story about that. But I now can sit here and share with you why the science is so important, but also our faith is too. So thinking about the church, I call us first responders. We are first responders. Now that may kind of sound a little foreign to you, but what would be an example of the church being a first responder?
Stephen Ministry.
Stephen Ministry. When someone needs food, do they come here? They show up at the door maybe or need a gas card? Or if they need someone to pray for them, or if they're in the hospital because of an accident or an injury, or someone's about to die, right? We are first responders as the church. And I think God calls us, or Jesus calls us to be first responders. But what's interesting too is in addition to helping families and bolstering hope and also giving them courage, we know that we have the right information to navigate tough stuff. Now granted, the scriptures, some may find antiquated, or what does that have to do with me? But we're teaching and learning from that every week, and we find relevance in scripture, right? We find relevance in saying like, I'm never alone. The light is in my heart, right? This little light of mine, right? There's so many little stories that we can teach that are universal that can help so many people. And we not only know that there's something about having a faith that can help in being instrumental and life-changing, but also we know that there's many faith traditions that can also be helpful. Like, what are some nice faith traditions that the church practices? What'd you say? Communion, yeah. Yeah. Prayer. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Prayer. Confession. Forgiveness of sins, right? Call to worship, sending out, right? So there's so many beautiful faith traditions that I think the world could benefit from. And when we know that we have these faith traditions to lean on, people can help to identify themselves as having a purpose. So one of my children, my daughter, is actually adopted, and both of her parents are deceased. So she's been with us for 2.5 years, full time. She was with us a year before that. but she struggles with knowing what is her purpose and her story. And every day I'm reminding her. It can be exhausting, right? Because I've already told her this yesterday and the day before that, but she needs to be reminded every day that she is not random. She is here for a purpose, she is here for a reason, and she has something to offer the world. But isn't that what we teach every day, right? But that's all about relationship, and hearing that from someone who noticed and who cared and wanted to share that. So as we walk along both these caregivers, we too are reminded that we can be a caregiver. And I love this saying, and I realize some of you are a little bit of a distance from the screen, so I'll read it out. But Karen Hansen is a hospital chaplain, and she's an author, and she's also an accompanist, I think I said that correctly. So she writes about accompaniment, and I love this metaphor. But she writes, "The gift of accompaniment is the essence of the incarnation. I feel no evil, for thou art with me, which is a perfect love casts out fear in the act of walking with one another at birth, through life, and at life's end." So as you can see, yes, it starts at birth, and that's where I have my origins in infant mental health and attachment, but it's throughout our lifespan. And so I just thought that was a beautiful quote, understanding that we accompany each other, we're designed for connection, we're made for connection, we live because of connection. We know that children who don't have a caregiver actually start to die. We know that. That's where they have NICUs, if you're familiar with these neonatal intensive care units, they have people holding the babies. Because you can make sure, like, the monitors are monitoring their heart and their breathing and their vitals are strong, but if they're not being touched, they start to struggle. So any comments, thoughts about this? How are we doing on time, Victoria? Good? Okay. So I have some really sweet videos that I want to share with you. I'm going to skip this because just mindful, I have a tendency to talk about this stuff because I'm really passionate about it and I love it. But I want to share with you a sweet video.
That little girl's amazing.
Isn't she? I love this video. Any thoughts, comments?
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you run into any discussion about the harm in forcing young kids to wear masks, how much damaging it was to them for this very reason?
Yes, and for the sake of time, there has been some research done about that, and I don't know how much to digress on that, but in childcare settings, because they needed to see our face for interaction, they were given clear masks, and in hospitals, they were using the clear ones as well. I know in schools, there was conversation about, how much to force that on children, but, it was a double-edged sword, really, and I don't want to get too off track with some of that, but yes, we know that obstructing our faces and our facial expressions can limit connection. We do know that. So I don't know if that, but I don't have any science in front of me.
I'm just wondering what the prevailing discussion is in the circles that you travel in, as opposed to what things are.
Yep, so I had a clear mask throughout my work, and I went back into the office as soon as I could. Yes, I did do a hybrid model within my practice where I did meet with people virtually, so I didn't have to wear the mask and they could see my face through the screen. But when I work with younger children, usually elementary age, I was in person with them, on the floor with them, with my clear mask. So, yeah.
And where can you get clear masks?
It's actually called Clear Masks. And you just look it up online. Yeah, it was just, and I may even have a picture I can show you, and I can get that for you, but yeah, it's a clear mask, yeah. All right, any other comments about the video? So did you catch what we can do? Yes, Victoria?
No, just
15 minutes. So did you catch what you as a community can do to help with children? What do you think? Even though I know you don't have young ones at home anymore, but does that escape you from maybe being responsible to help? Conviction is what, kind of helps keep me on track, right? But I hope that if there's a little baby passing by you or a little toddler running by, or if you sit near a family, get to know their name. Say hello. Say, I see you. I notice you.
There's a disconnect here, because I used to do that a lot. I used to go to playgrounds and push kids on swings.
That's great.
But today I wouldn't dare do that.
Really?
Because of the phobia.
Yeah.
It's really gotten bad. I always remember kid was getting something out of a candy machine, piece of gum, and I went to help him, and I looked over his dad. His what are you doing?
Really?
That's it, yeah.
Even at the church, though, you find that?
Dark sunglasses on.
No,
But even at the church, you would find that, you think? See, and I'm so surprised by that because, well, it was my birthday last week, and we had gone to a restaurant. It was a very popular restaurant, so we were waiting at the bar with our children, and we sat next to this wonderful couple, and they immediately interacted with my children, and I welcomed it, and I engaged the conversation. They were asking all sorts of questions. My children were responding. The serve and return. It's like a volleyball game. And my children, obviously, they're my kids, so we know the importance of making eye contact, of speaking to people, of noticing them, of acknowledging them. So
Nancy knows I do that a lot, right? I used to do a lot of that, but I'm very scary nowadays.
Take Nancy with you.
well, and maybe, you know,
A
when-
man today doesn't even go in a restroom if there's boy, female, or male in the restroom. It's just not safe anymore because of the accusations that
No,
come
that's
out.
true.
You know,
That's a fact.
Even
That's
if you
not-
go to VVS or something, they don't let you,
Oh, yeah.
they have
No.
rules.
But we
Yeah.
agree with what you're saying. We're not
Right,
disagreeing with what
right.
you're
Well,
saying.
and maybe as
It's
a
just-
church then, and obviously you have representation and we can have discussion and I'm happy to come back. There's policies in place. I teach keeping kids safe at our church where we would want our whole congregation to understand how to keep kids safe. We would unfortunately then need to go through a background check and not everybody has to do that. And I'm sure you already do that
Well, if I
here.
stop to talk to a kid on the street, I'm gonna be
No, but
in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different. So
And I used
I don't
to
want
do that all
to.
the time.
Yeah, so I know for the sake of time, Victoria, did you?
No, I'm just saying as a teacher, retired, but I'm still out there subbing now, you're not allowed to touch the child. They're not, even elementary, which is what I work in, when they come up and try and hug you and stuff, and you kind of have to push them off.
Isn't it sad?
When you're working with, and especially with the ESC and the autistic kids, that actually, it's a whole different, you can't connect with
Well,
kids.
see, that needs to change somehow. We
Well-
have community and responding and things to kids.
And granted, again, you know, we just need to do it within discretion, is what I say.
Yeah.
And
I think that's a
so,
great concept, that serve and return.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you gotta be so cautious today because the liberals are out there that'll run you through the ringer.
I will say this.
Yes.
Last thing too, and I know that Larry and I both work with I work at Universal Studios.
okay, yeah.
Okay? And when you're working with groups, you
I-
have
I
a diverse amount of people that
Mhm.
different personalities and all. The best thing that I can do for this connection is to tell the kid that they must really be loved.
Hmm.
And you don't know the magnitude of emotion that comes from the parents
Mhm.
when I say something like that.
Mhm.
I mean, I've had parents say, well, we've been telling them so all the, you know, this whole trip here, the thousands of dollars that we spend to take the kids to Universal. And then the other parents will say, oh, thank you so much for saying that.
Mhm.
You know, some kids come through with cancer and all of this. And it's
Right,
just,
right.
Yeah, that one-on-one is very important.
Right. So, you know, how we connect with each other. I mean, I understand the importance of touch, and that was discussed in the video, of course, with babies. But I'm connecting with you right now. I asked you your names. I asked some of your personal story. I'm moving around. I'm hoping you know me a little bit and feel comfortable with me. So connection can happen, but that's what I live in the science, right? I like eat, breathe, and sleep it. But, you know, when it comes to connection, there's so many ways that we can connect with each other. It doesn't just have to be, you know, on a playground or, unfortunately, you know, offering a
I
handshake.
can't imagine going to the playground anymore, pushing kids on the street.
Yeah. Yes.
Do that all the time.
One quick comment.
Sure, sure.
You were speaking earlier, and it's in relation to connection. Your two examples are very different.
Mm.
He get close as a guide to a kid trying to do something good. You had your kids connecting with the other kids. So
Or no, they were
you know,
adults. No, they weren't adults. It was an adult couple.
I was an old couple.
It was an adult couple that was out enjoying their night.
Your
Mhm.
kids.
We were all four sitting there, and my daughter was closest to them, and they started asking her questions. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and I was, of course, paying attention, right? But I don't mind that.
No.
You know, I don't mind that at all, right? And so my daughter needs that especially. She needs people to notice her because of her story, right?
Some parents would be highly offended.
And they may be, and that's usually then they have someone like me in their life.
I know when we had three sons and they were boom, 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 right in a row. And every time we went to a restaurant, and they were beautiful kids, every time we went, strange people would come up and approach them and love on them and that. And we had no problems with that. But that was kind of a different world then. But today's parent, let's say that same couple you met said, oh, let me take little Johnny to the bathroom for you.
I would, yeah, of course not. And that wouldn't happen even
Think
in,
another word.
But it
Yeah.
sounds like you're right on top of it and you're right. And then I don't think there would be a problem. I think Ron, you know,
yeah, I would
you could-
welcome you pushing my
Yeah.
child on the swing. I really would.
How about if
I
I
haven't
push you down?
disappeared. But I haven't disappeared, so my eyes are always seeing what my children are doing, right?
Right.
And so I would welcome someone to notice them and to welcome them into what I say, a community of saying, you know what, I am here with my grandkids and I see you could use some help because your mom's over there with that other child. You know, I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing.
Well, I'm careful, I do it when Nancy's around, when she's not around, I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's smart.
Yeah. So for the sake of time, I wanted to show you another video. Well, I guess we finish it. Okay, let me go ahead. I'm going to show you one more. So this makes it a little more science. So Ed Tronick, he is a physician out of, I want to say, the Center for Developing Child out of Harvard. And he gives a little bit more science grit to this serve and return. He actually coined the phrase, is what we say. Again, thank you.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing. It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So again, I know that many of you don't have young children like this at home, but even though these concepts are taught to us through the science of early childhood, how can we apply that to now? If someone gives us a still face, what does that translate as an adult?
Rejection.
Rejection. What if you just had a significant event in your life and no one comes and talks to you about it?
Isolation.
Isolation. Yeah. So, and how do we then feel, right, if we're not noticed? I'm currently working with someone who lost their wife prematurely through cancer. and they're very young, and their best friend of many, many years did not approach them for quite a few months. And he was working through that, right? But what did I do for my best friend to not come talk to me, right? And really what it came down to is most often people don't know what to say, right? And so it's hard. How do you approach that? How do you engage when you know someone's hurting? How do you enter into the space where you're going to feel pain and you have to sit with them in it? And unfortunately, a lot of us avoid pain, right? Because what if we get emotional in front of them? Oh no, right? Or what if I fumble in my words and I say something stupid? Well, what I'm here to encourage you about is just being with them and even saying, I don't have the words, but I want you to know I care. And I see you. And I'm here if you need me. That's enough. You're not going to have any magic wand to make them feel better. You're really not. But your relationship and knowing that they matter to you can help them feel better. So the still face experiment we do every day. We do it every day when we may not be able to catch a call, or we're texting and something's going on in church, which I've been guilty of, right? Or we're in the middle of something and we're too busy with something else happening. We do it every day. And what Ed Tronick will say is really the magic is the reparation. Like, I'm so sorry, I got caught off in a call, I had to step out, but I'm here now. Did you need me? Can we talk? Any comments, thoughts? Yes.
Yes, I have to the situation in many families, and probably we have seen in our families, where the parents put the kids in front of the screen and they are in front of their screen. Maybe there is no that interaction because there is no interaction.
Yes, yes. And that's actually how Carol met me, is because I talked about that in my previous talk with Presbyterian women. But
I guess in Korea they have a major problem with autism, which autism is very similar to what you're talking about.
Lack of social emotional.
And there's a series that was developed for Netflix and Korea. It's all in subtitles, but it's well worth watching. It's The Extraordinary Attorney Woo. Have any of you seen that or heard of it?
I have heard of
You have to
that.
read the things, but it's not.
It is the absolute best series you've ever watched, and what it deals with is exactly what we're talking here. Because the person that's autistic goes through life not understanding people's reactions
They
to
can't
them.
touch, they can't.
Before I went on my 3 tours this summer, or the one tour, I had 5 autistics with me. I just wish I had seen this before so that I would understand what that autistic child, the gal who does it, it's called Extraordinary Attorney Woo. Just get through the first one, and we watch them at 5 or 6 in the afternoon. We don't watch it late at night because you fall asleep. You can't
You gotta read it. and
You
they
have to
talk
read it,
fast,
but
all
it
this
is,
stuff.
once you've watched the first one, you'll be hooked for all 16 episodes.
That's great.
Yeah, and it is, but that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So
That's
social
exactly-
emotional needs are so important, right? They're
And
so
they don't
important.
have their emotional needs met because they don't sense emotional needs. And we went up yesterday and read about the actress in it, and we thought she was autistic. She's that good. We thought she was an autistic, and she's acting the whole time. And she's fabulous. She can't go through a doorway. And how do we as human beings, when I was on these tours this summer, I would have my autistics, I had 3 of them were unchaperoned, and they would just lay down, right? We'd be in Disney. They'd lay down right on the sidewalk in Disney. And what do? How do you handle that? Do you continue? And I tried to love them and whatnot, but it's just, that's kind of, I think,
Yes.
being around an autistic child is pretty rough.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
It teaches you a lot.
It does. It does.
You watch that,
Yeah.
and this week
Right.
you'll be back.
But we
Next week you'll
know-
be saying,
Yeah.
it's the #1 series on Netflix right now.
Yeah.
For
I
China.
give a lot of the
Yeah.
accessible passes for Universal for Children.
Ah,
Oh,
yeah.
good, yeah.
So I think you've
So
got
that's why
the
you
point
need-
about how important it is to understand social emotional needs. But it is all about those are the traits that connect us, right? To be able to emotionally connect with you. I mean, there's a reason we cry at commercials. There's a reason we get emotional at a funeral or emotional at a wedding, right?
Commercials?
Have you never? Well, so who's cried at a commercial? I have. I know, right? Maybe more the women in the room have. But, or cry at a movie. You know, there's a reason we don't know the actors on the screen, right? However, there's something about what they're conveying to us in the message of the story that touches us. And that's what matters. So we don't have to be in the movie. We don't have to be in the story or know anyone personally to be touched by each other. If I were in a terrible mood today and I wasn't, moving around and engaging you, you would feel that. And you'd be like, okay, that wasn't a good time. Don't have Lisa come back, right? You would feel that. You would feel that. We feel it. And sometimes we don't know quite what it is. We just sense it like something's going on with that person. Maybe I need to give them a call. Because we do pick up on each other's energy a lot more than we give each other credit for. We know that through a longitudinal study that was done through the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. It's one of the longest studies that we've done where we have followed kindergartners. But when they were looking at those kindergartners that did better later in life, as we studied their behaviors in kindergarten, the ones that ended up getting a great job, the ones that moved on with their education and finished school were the ones that knew how to share, the ones that knew how to cooperate, help other kids, listen to others, and resolve problems. There is the gospel.
I think too, and I think Ron brought it up, what damage has been this last 2 years. Not just mass, but this whole COVID thing. And Ron just got done with COVID, but to take a kid who probably will fly through COVID with no real major problems and mask him up, mask her up, keep him out of school, do all these things. We're going to see the devastation that this last 2 years.
Yeah, and I don't want to get us too off topic because I'm here to share the good news, right? Like I'm all about the good news, right? And all I can do is try to promote this work, to try to share it with you, to try to encourage you and support you in all that you do here as a community. Yes.
Do you find a problem with dependency? It seems like you're creating a lot of dependency. That people can't work through the problems, or they're too weak.
Yeah, I kind of thought of that too.
Say that one more time. Can you rephrase your question?
It seems like, dependency is good. A degree of dependency is good.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like we've gone overboard, and people are so dependent they
cook
cannot
dinner.
do anything.
So you think
they can't
social-
function. Well,
So if I
think
understand, you think the social emotional awareness is creating dependency? Is that
I
what
think
you're
so,
saying?
yeah.
Actually, some will say it's the opposite. Some will say it's the opposite. So when we share with emotion, we're then modeling how to handle emotion. So when we teach children it's okay to be sad and allow them to be sad, then we are teaching them concepts that actually, like I go back to here, these are your children that are going to do better in life because we're teaching them these things at a very young age.
What's an example would be like if you see a kid that has trouble tying their shoe, you don't rush over there and tie their shoe, you let them work through it.
Right, and that's not the kind of connection I'm talking about. I'm not saying being an operational parent or an operational community member. Those are operational things, what I say, like teaching them how to tie their shoe. I'm just teaching them to be a fellow human and acknowledge, right? Like, you matter to me, but that's not dependence. Like, I'm not doing it for you. I'm just saying, like, hey, I noticed you today and I really dig your shoes.
And that's a good thing. That's
Right.
a very good thing.
Right? Okay.
It is definitely affecting the kids in the school, just so you know.
Oh, yeah.
tremendously.
Oh, big time. Yeah, what's the school weird like this year?
Well, they're trying to go back to mask.
It's a whole, I'll talk to you later.
Well, anxiety's on the rise, right? And I do
It's not-
consultation with our schools. So anxiety,
What's
that
on-
goes back
anxiety,
to
yeah.
so that goes back to the earlier stats that I showed you. Anxiety's definitely on the rise. So, but that, yes, we can say COVID, but there's a whole lot more going on than just COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could just say this real quick. I heard this one time, it really hit me, that a lot of times when there's like two children, brother and sister, and one's really cute and the other's not
Yeah.
very attractive, and you just ooh and awe on the one, how devastating that can be.
Yes.
And it made me aware when I
Yes.
heard that too.
Yes,
You know,
so there's
think about
actually a
the
German
brother,
term
sister.
that there's baby cuteness. Like, you can put a baby in a room with toddlers and the cuter baby will get more attention even from the toddlers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but there is something about the social skills too that the baby who's cute starts to learn.
That was my curse.
That was your curse? Too darn cute?
It was too cute.
Too cute. Too cute.
You already was cute when you wasn't.
So I bring this back to you, and I'll be back next week. But I guess to think about how can you as a church expand opportunities to help families grow in social emotional awareness. And how can we then assess it, integrate it, measure in our various ministries, within the faith building settings? Like, how can we take these concepts? And I'm hoping that it's not going to just sit here. My purpose is I'm all about spreading the wealth of information and knowledge that helps me be a better human. I would think that you want to be a better human as well, living out my purpose, doing what God has charged me to do. And so that's why I'm here to promote this wonderful wisdom. But I'm hoping that you will take this information and share it.